Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. In this video, I am going over my DraftKings and FanDuel week number 6 NFL first look picks. So let's go ahead and get started. We have 11 games on this main slate, 1 or 2 games fewer than we've had originally, just with teams finally taking the bye. A couple teams on the bye week this week. So let's get started. As always, if you enjoy the videos, appreciate it if the like button for me. Subscribe if you haven't already. We are approaching a very busy time. Today's opening night of the NHL. NBA starting next week. Got MLB playoffs in full force. PGA is starting to get into a swing of things. A couple of events in. UFC fights are coming up. Just a great time for sports. So hope you guys are excited. Throughout until end of the year, basically, even pretty much after that, we'll have a lot of sports going on. A lot of good things for DFS. So try to make some money. It was a good week 5 for FanDuel. Hit on the early main afternoon and the Monday night showdown. DraftKings, not as good of a week. Just hit on the afternoon and the Monday night showdown and cash games. But we'll go ahead and look at this week. Missed on a couple of players on DraftKings, which kind of definitely would have hit if I went with like Lockett, who I was originally on, but then ended up going with like Robert Woods. Just a couple of bad pivots that I made, which ended up costing us. But FanDuel, Gabe Davis at 6K was a great play. Hope you guys played him. That basically what carried us. Him. And then we got 2 great running backs with Dalvin Cook in there. Also had a great game from Leonard Fournette. But let's go ahead and look at this week. Starting off, just looking at the Vegas totals, we have a rematch of the best game in NFL history, which occurred last year between the Bills and the Chiefs. This one is once again in Kansas City. It is a 425 start, so you probably want to get at least some exposure to that game. You have the highest total of the slate, 53.5 right now. Bills are favored. They have the highest total on the slate at 28.25, and then we have the Cardinals there at 26.75. You have the Packers also coming off of a disappointing loss where they did nothing in the second half against the Giants in London. The Bucks look pretty good, and then Chiefs are checking in at 25.75. You got a bunch of other teams with above 25 total, and then we got a fun night game as well between the Eagles and Cowboys. So it should be a very fun week number 6. Let's go ahead and get started. Looking at the quarterback plays, you have Josh Allen. He's always going to be a guy that you gonna look to get to if you have the salary, especially in this game. You know he's going to be motivated. He's probably going to drop 30 plus fantasy points without any, probably even more than that if he really gets going. But he's just nothing negative you can say about him. It is a good matchup for him in terms of passing. Chiefs have a good run defense, especially with their front 7. So you could see them throw even more, but Bills are already throwing at a ridiculously high rate. So Josh Allen, like him a lot more than Lamar Jackson this week. Like him more than Patrick Mahomes, just being favored, having a better matchup. The Bills have a better defense than the Chiefs, hands down. And the fact that Josh Allen will run a little bit more than Mahomes. Then you got Kyler Murray at 73. Could be a nice GBP play just because people are going to overlook him. Personally, I like some other guys that are a little bit cheaper, but he's another quarterback that can run a little bit, hasn't done as much of that this year as you would have expected. Burrow, 67. I'd probably rather get down to like Tom Brady, who gets a great matchup against the Steelers. Their defense is really shot right now, bottom 10 in both categories, one of the worst passing defenses so far this year. And Tom Brady threw 52 times back-to-back games, so they love to air it out. You saw Leonard Fournette have 10 catches out of the backfield last week, so if they don't want to run, they're not, and Tom Brady doesn't like to run the ball, so they keep throwing it. So it's going to be a matter of time before Tom Brady has like a multi-touchdown game. He's only had one of those this year, although he's throwing so much. So just looking at the odds, he's definitely going to have a game where he throws 3, 4, possibly even 5 touchdowns. And then $8,100 for Aaron Rodgers, $6,100 for Aaron Rodgers. He's been disappointing this year in terms of fantasy perspective. They've been utilizing the running backs more, trying to force, now that they don't have Devontae Adams, just kind of to make teams respect the run a little bit more. So we haven't seen Rodgers top 40 pass attempts yet. But the matchup is really good against the Jets. They're at home. It could turn into a game where the Packers get out to a big lead and then they just run the ball in the second half. So if that doesn't happen, then Rodgers would look pretty appealing at 61. But I'd probably rather get down to like even Kirk Cousins. I'd probably prefer over Rodgers just because Cousins, very easy to stack him with Justin Jefferson. Stack him possibly even with like Dalvin Cook if you wanted to, or Thielen. And then $5,700 to get to Geno Smith, who's been awesome this year. 9 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. I mean, if he was with the Broncos, you'd expect the Broncos to win, more than a couple of games that they've had won so far. I expect him to be like 4-1 possibly, or even 3-2, just because Broncos defense been awesome this year. It's just that they got nothing out of Russell Wilson, who's been one of the worst quarterbacks so far through the first 5 weeks. Geno Smith's doing his thing. Another multi-touchdown game last week. Another week where he had a plus or above a 132 passer rating, which is excellent. He didn't even throw that many passes, just 25 against the Saints. They still put up 32 points. He had a couple of long touchdown passes with Metcalf and Lockett. He also will take off at times. You don't expect him to run a lot, but that is something that he can do if he has to scramble a bit. And the matchup against the Cardinals is appealing in terms of a passing perspective. They're giving up about a little over 3 touchdowns per game, 3 touchdowns and a field goal, we'll call it that. So 57 at home. I don't mind Geno Smith. They've shown the ability to put up points, and his weapons are very cheap to stack. They lost Rashard Penny, so Kenneth Walker, the rookie running back, is going to get a lot of work this week and going on to for the rest of the year because Penny's on IR. So I like Geno Smith at 57. Going further below that, you have like Lawrence if you wanted to go to him in a bounce back spot, or possibly even go down to like but these guys have tough matchups, Mariota and Wilson. Mariota he's been pretty good this year in terms of fantasy just with running, but he still gives you some turnover issues, and he just doesn't have that many weapons to throw to, especially if Pitts can hopefully return this week. But Drake London has a Q tag right now, and they don't have Patterson, who was big for them. Moving on to running backs this week. The top 2 have some tough matchups. So I'm passing on McCaffrey, passing on Chubb, although he's been awesome. And he was a great play last week. That game ended up being a great one to stack up. And Jonathan Taylor's 8K if he plays this week, fine. But he's also doesn't look as good as he did last year. And we'll see if teams are adjusting to him a little bit. But the Jacksonville Jaguars, this year they are good against the run, but in years past they've been bad. So I probably like some guys more than getting to a not 100% Jonathan Taylor this week. Personally, for me, I'm going with some of these value picks like Stevenson, just because Damian Harris is doubtful. He's probably going to miss a few weeks, and Stevenson's going to benefit by getting most of the touches out of the backfield. They have J.J. Taylor to get a couple, but he didn't do well. He got like 6 carries last week for 11 yards, whereas Stevenson busted out a 49-yarder, caught a couple of passes, put up 20-plus fantasy points. And the Browns have been giving up some big games to running backs. We saw Eckler go off against them last week. And I think even the backup running back, Kelly, might have had a touchdown last week. So Stevenson is a guy I'm going to plug in. And then also Kenneth Walker, tough to fade just because of just with the injury to Rashad Penny. His price tag hasn't really gone up as much as you would have thought. He only went up $700 from his most recent price tag, where he played well, 8 carries, 88 yards, had a 69-yarder and a touchdown, and he's going to step into the primary role, can even catch a couple of passes if they need him to. But at this price tag, it's not often you get a running back that's going to start and get a good amount of snaps. Not the easiest matchup, but he's going to catch a couple of passes out of the backfield, and just the price tag is something that it's going to be tough for me to pass on, especially because the Seahawks have shown the ability to move the ball. Wide receivers, you have Justin Jefferson, 89. He's been awesome in the last few weeks. Of course, the week that I took him is when he put up 4 fantasy points. Otherwise, he's been awesome in 3 out of the 5 games. But I like Jefferson a ton. I like him probably better than going up to Cooper Kupp for $800. Save $800. Diggs is $500 less. Probably still like Jefferson more just because I'll probably get up down to like Gabe Davis again. But we'll see. It's still like Jefferson's probably my favorite of the top 3. This tier would be Chase, but I'm not that fond of anybody in this tier. I'd rather go down a little bit to get at least to Gabe Davis. They are banged up a little bit at the wide receiver position right now. Dawson Knox missed last week. We saw Kumaro miss. He's dealing with a high ankle sprain. We saw Crowder. He's placed on IR, and then McKenzie's in concussion protocol. So we'll see if those guys are, at least one or two of those guys are able to return. But I still like Gabe Davis. He's still playing right up there with Diggs. He's even out-snapped Diggs a lot of these weeks. And last time he faced the Chiefs, he put up 4 touchdowns, 200-plus yards. It's tough to pass on him, especially coming off of last week, getting some momentum. Price tag is still very reasonable for the team with the highest total and the team that should put up and should be able to move the ball with ease against this Chiefs defense. Second receiver I like, once again, I'm going back to Chris Godwin. He was fine last week, 6 targets, 6 receptions. He got 1 carry. Tom Brady just hasn't really gone to a lot of touchdown passes. I think that'll come. They're starting to put up some points. Last week, they kind of got stalled in the second half against the Falcons, and they ended up almost coughing that game up. Probably could have coughed that game up if the ref didn't call that BS roughing the passer. But Godwin, 61, once again, just very affordable. He's going to be peppered with targets, and the matchup is excellent against the Steelers. Like, they are in some trouble right now. Going further down in the 5K range, Cooper had another good week. He's had a couple of good. He's been boom or bust this year, but against the Patriots, you can take a shot with given the price tag. And then another receiver that's really cheap that's been awesome this year is Tyler Lockett. He's only $5,600. He's getting a good amount of targets. He's finally got into the end zone not once but twice last week. 30 fantasy points. The price tag hasn't moved much on him at all, and seems like the perfect guy to pair with Geno Smith if you wanted to stack. So he's good amount cheaper than Metcalf, $1,200. So I take the savings and play Lockett instead. And then sub 5K, we have like Romeo Doubs, who I like as a value. We have George Pickens, who's looked good with Kenny Pickett. Valdez Scantling, top 90 yards, and has been getting a lot of targets, 7+ in 3 or 4 straight weeks. So those guys all look pretty appealing. And then the rest will be depending on what happens with all these questionable tags as we get on with the week. Tight ends for this week, Travis Kelce will be the top end. He only had 25 yards last night, but he had 4 touchdowns, so another crazy game from Travis Kelce. Higbees continues to be getting a good amount of targets. He's been the second most targeted guy behind Cooper Kupp this year. We have Tanyan potentially against the Jets. Dawson Knox, if he does play, he's only 34. I'd probably take a shot with him. And then you have like Kate Otten, who got some good work last week with Brate out, and he might be an option again this week if Brate is not able to play. Defenses, going with a cheap defense would be the Panthers for sure. Like Stafford in that offense has not looked good at all. And Stafford's thrown like 7 picks already this year, 5 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. So there's a chance, just like last week, where the Cowboys defense went off and they were pretty popular, ended up getting to them. But this week it could be the Panthers. They're the cheapest on the DraftKings. The Bills, 27 would be one that you could take a shot with just because they'll probably give up a lot of points, but they could also have like a pick six or force a fumble, even though Mahomes is pretty good at not really doing too many turnover issues, but Bills just have that good of a defense. And the Jags potentially at 3K against the Colts look decent, I'd say. And then if you're looking for a pay-up defense, it would go all the way up to probably the Rams just because Baker's going to be out for a few weeks. Or you can go down maybe to like the 49ers against Mariota and a team that could be down a couple of weapons once again this week. But that's about it for DraftKings. Feel pretty good about these 6 mid-range values. Pretty balanced lineup. But let's go ahead now and look at FanDuel. All right, for FanDuel, starting off with the quarterback position, we have Josh Allen at 92. He's 400 more than Lamar Jackson, but still prefer Josh Allen as my favorite quarterback. And then I would look to Mahomes. Like him more than these other guys, with Murray and Burrow being similarly priced. You got some good options in 7K range once again, like Tom Brady, 75. He's only 100 more than Geno Smith, so I'd rather get to Tom Brady than Geno Smith on FanDuel. But Geno Smith could be like a GPP option. Running backs, once again, kind of sticking with the same couple. Stevenson, I like, and then Kenneth Walker. We also have on DraftKings, you have a good price tag on Leonard Fournette and Kamara. So those guys are in play as well, and maybe in the flex spot. But I'd probably start with these two once again on FanDuel. Wide receiver picks, Justin Jefferson, Cooper Kupp. Diggs are pretty similarly priced. I still would go Jefferson, then Kupp, then Diggs. Or possibly on FanDuel, DraftKings will probably go Jefferson, Diggs, then Kupp, just with Kupp being a lot more expensive than Diggs. But on FanDuel, it's not really the case. Lockett is expensive on FanDuel. He's more than DK Metcalf, so those guys I'm not that high on FanDuel. I'd rather go to like Gabe Davis, who's cheaper. I'd rather get to Chris Godwin, who's cheap as well at $6,800. And for value picks, like Alan Lazard's been one of the main go-to guys for Rodgers when he does like to throw in the red zone, and he's been getting a good amount of targets as well. He's affordable. We have Romeo Doubs. Also looks pretty appealing at his price tag at 55, I believe. Yeah, 55. That price tag is really nice. But with these value running backs, can pay up at receiver, and getting to Jefferson as well against Miami, who's given up so many yards and so many points this year defensively. And last couple of weeks, Jefferson, even without getting into the end zone, he's been one of the best receivers of the slate. 13 targets in each one. And it's not like he had great matchups against Chicago and against the Saints, but he produced in both. And now he gets a really good matchup against the Dolphins defense. So hopefully he's able to continue his dominance and maybe even get into the end zone and put up north of 30 fantasy points, which is what he would have done if he got into the end zone one of the 2 previous weeks. Tight end wise, on FanDuel, I really like George Kittle at only 57. He gets a great matchup against the Falcons. He should have a couple of big games. We know he's always had and always been able to produce with Garoppolo there. Dawson Knox 51 as another value, and then pay up would be Travis Kelce. I love how they put up Taysom Hill at 75. It's pretty funny. And then defense, pretty much the same thing. I talked about over on DraftKings, the values. Look at maybe the Bills defense, or we can look to like the Panthers. But that's about it for this week. For the first look, thank you for watching. Best of luck, and I will see you all next time.